Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars and Autohaus of Naples on a muggy, shitty, miserable. It's just hot. It's just an awful Florida July morning. It's Thursday. I don't know if this video get up today, so it's probably going to be Friday when it does. But either way, it doesn't matter. The days are all blending together. They're hot, they're rotten, they're humid, they're rainy. It's just like an absolute swamp. It's a jungle down here. And all the smart people have gotten out, leaving us nitwits to weather that just isn't fit for human existence. And that's where I am right now. So there it is. There's the weather report. It hasn't changed much, and I don't foresee it changing in the near future. There's still August to go, and God knows that's not a better month than where we're at now. So look, what I'm going to do is, this is a big topic, this car. You wouldn't think so, but it is. So I'm going to dive right into it. I'll give you a quick flask update. Just about done. Winners selected. I ordered a label printer and some labels. I'm getting all that done. Went to the post office yesterday and got all the boxes. So those are going to be shipped out in the very, very near future, hopefully by tomorrow. And they will be on their way to the few lucky winners. Also, Penelope has now retrieved some hats, so we're going to see what we do with those. But, let's get this flask thing done first and move on from there. Otherwise, nothing much has changed. There's a new project coming, an 80 Z28 on top of the 89 IROC Z. And, again, the projects are just piling up at the time when I really don't want them to. I'm trying to get down to as few cars as possible so I can take a trip somewhere, get the hell out of town, go to a cabin in the wilderness and not let anyone within rifle range. That's truly my plan, so we'll see if I can pull that off. But anyway, look, let's just dive into this car. And what I have today is a 1988 Lincoln Continental Signature Series. 88 was the first of the 8th generation Continental. And I can tell you there are few nameplates in car history as storied as the Continental, whether it be, a Lincoln Continental or just Continental on its own. It's one of the most famous and ongoing nameplates that you're going to find. It ran for about 55 years of production with a couple little hiccups in between, and 10 different generations, going all the way to 2020. So, Continental has been around for a long time, and it's part of American history, American pop culture, and has always had sort of a place in a variety of different aspects, and we'll kind of get into that. It originated with a guy named Edsel Ford. He was president of Ford at the time, but still often overruled by his dad, Henry, who was a bit of a bastard. And despite Edsel's position, he still had to answer to Henry. Unfortunately for Edsel, Henry was a little bit less concerned with Lincoln than he was with Ford proper, and that gave Edsel a bit of a free hand to do some of the stuff he wanted to do. He was a much more refined and elegant guy than his dad. Of course, he'd had a more privileged upbringing and more exposure to some of the finer things. And he had traveled to Europe with his mom. He was very impressed with the look and style of European cars. And he decided to build something new and beautiful. And the result was the 12-cylinder Lincoln Zephyr Continental, which started roaming the earth in 1939. There's some debate as the 39 or 40 model. Doesn't matter. It was out in 39. We're going to call it a 39 model. He sort of oversaw the design of it with one of his chief designers at Lincoln, a pretty skilled guy whose name escapes me at the moment. But they came up with this thing. They shipped it down to Edsel when he was on vacation in Florida. And apparently Edsel's wealthy friends all went nuts for it. And the story is he came back to Michigan with 200 extra orders for the car. So it was a fairly big deal at the time. And the car is considered, that first Continental is considered to be something, even in its day, it was considered to be a classic at the time, actually, it was considered to be a modern engineering thing. It was in the Museum of Modern Art in '46. But it's always been appreciated since new. Frank Lloyd Wright, the famous architect, thought it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen and ordered 2 of them. So it was pretty hip with the in crowd. World War II interrupted production, though. The thing came out in '40 at Pearl Harbor soon after, and then, of course, all the there wasn't going to be many 12-cylinder cars roaming the earth while they needed P-51 Mustangs to defeat the Hun. So World War II interrupted production. Edsel died in '43, and of course the war ended in '45. But Edsel's death hampered the idea of a replacement. So they kept building that car for another couple years. It ended in 1948, and then Continental, the nameplate, took a break all the way until 1956, its first break. In '56, Ford had this crazy dream of competing with Rolls-Royce and Bentley, and they made the Continental its own division, well above the Lincoln Mercury division. And they built the Mark II, the Continental Mark II, which was pretty much hand-built, lavishly equipped, very low production, and at the time one of the most expensive cars in the world at $10,000, which was a shitload of money back then, about $120,000 today adjusted for inflation. Excuse me. It was definitely not for the common man, and it became very famous with the sort of suave hipsters of the time. Your Frank Sinatras drove them, your Elizabeth Taylors, your high-end Chicago gangsters. It was just one of those cars, and it was very, very cool. But it was also a pipe dream because Ford lost a ton of money, like $1,000 on each one. They didn't build that many of them, and after it went away, they kind of had to bring the division back down to earth, which is what they did. So there were 5 more generations of Continental after that until they got to this one, and that included the suicide door convertible that one was made famous by the Kennedy assassination car, which, if you remember, they used that car afterwards all the way through 1977. I mean, imagine being a president and you're there, they pull up and, this is the one Kennedy got shot in, hey, aren't you lucky? Man, that would freak me right the hell out. So I imagine, Nixon and LBJ were a little bit troubled having to drive around that thing. What's that stain, in the back? Anyway, different times. I guess government was maybe a little bit more efficient and conservative back then in terms of the money it spent. I mean, Jesus, honestly, how'd you like to be a president riding in that thing? It was creepy as hell. The Continental was then reignited after some sort of, I don't know, you call them substandard, not beloved models. And then the Mark III came out in '67, and that was the brainchild of Lee Iacocca, who decided to put a Rolls-Royce grill on a Thunderbird, and it took the country by storm. Iacocca did have a knack for that, and basically he took this, Thunderbird, which was a bit of a luxury car at the time, the Thunderbird, made it more luxurious, put this big fancy grill on it, and it all of a sudden was selling pretty damn well. But it did also start the trend of the Continental as really only just a giant chrome-laden Luxo barge that was in no way intended to be a driver's car. It was just meant to very luxuriously transport people around. And, then you have the Mark IV, which was a stunning car, but Cool Whip at the 4 corners. The Mark V, an incredibly angular, I think one of the best looking Lincolns of all time, but even in its time it was considered a dinosaur, even when it was new, because all the downsizing was underway. And then there was the Mark VI, which was not very beloved. The Continentals were sort of, they had to, in order to make these cars, they had to change the Continental and turn it into the town car, and that freed up the nameplate for what they were planning to do. It also led to the 7th generation Continental, which is one of my favorite cars of the 80s, because it's so weird and quirky. I mean, I wish I could find a mint version of one, not just to do a review on, but it's one that I'd have to think about owning, because I absolutely love those cars. But But that leads us to this. The 8th generation Continental. And honestly, this is where it becomes a bit interesting to me. Ford had become intent on creating something that really hadn't been pulled off yet. And that was the Luxo barge as a driver's car. This was weird. I mean, there had been some attempts to mimic European cars. There was the Pontiac 6000, if you remember that. Even in the luxury world, there was that Eldorado touring coupe in '85, which made a stab at feeling European, but it wasn't really a serious effort. Ford decided that they were going to take the Continental and turn it into something that could compete with the, look, they were going to take it not just to Cadillac and Chrysler. They were now going to take it to them and Mercedes-Benz, Audi, BMW, and soon to be the big luxurious sedans coming from Toyota, Datsun, and Honda, the Lexus, the Infiniti, and the Acura. And they knew that this was a market that was going to become very, very competitive, and they wanted to make a car that could compete. So they put a ton of money into it, and this is the thing, man. And, this car, now you look at it, you don't realize, it's sort of a forgotten car. And when you do see it, you don't realize just how important it was. And we'll get into why. But this car was an absolute sea change for the domestic car market. It was very innovative at the time and should be famous for some of the stuff that it introduced. And it really isn't. And I do think that's a bit of a pity. They took the chassis and running gear from the very successful Taurus and Sable line that was doing very well at the time. And this is where a lot of people say, oh, that Continental is a gussied up Sable. Yeah, okay, it is. I mean, that's without question, but it was more than that. I mean, they stretched the car out. They gave it a longer wheelbase. They invested millions and millions of dollars in the suspension and the ride and the engine, and in a way to make it on par with a premium car. And I think they were pretty successful doing it. The car had tremendous sales, worked very, very well, exceeded expectations, and in some ways it did bring Ford and Lincoln and their luxury lineup into the modern era. For the engine, they took the V6 from the Taurus, Cougar, and Thunderbird. They added premium features like a ballad shaft, multi-port fuel injection, tuned intake runners, smoothed it out. They really did make the car it's wonderful, right? We've got helicopters at low altitude right overhead. Where the hell is this thing? Right overhead. Yeah. Wonderful. I hope that's mosquito control. God, I really, really do. But anyway, look, they took the car and they made it more modern. And look, to do this, the outside would have to be as revolutionary and forward-thinking as what was underneath. And they did. They used the Ford Aero look of the time. They cut back on the chrome, although there's still a bit here and there. They cut back on the vinyl roofs, the opera windows, the big chrome wire wheel covers. They gave it alloy rims. They gave it flush door handles, flush composite headlamps. They made the car look a lot more modern, sort of in style with what a Mercedes or BMW. I mean, look, they had to retain some stuff, for the traditional Continental buyer, because he was still around. I mean, the guy who bought a new Mark III was still buying Continentals in the 80s. So you can see it does have a big chrome strip over the headlights. It has a waterfall grille. It has another chrome strip in the bumper. But look at the flushness of the door handles. They're not big chrome affairs. There's no big chrome side view mirrors. The glass has gone flush. There's a nice little stainlessy chrome runner down the rocker panel. You've got impact strips down the side, which do look very European. The gas door just sort of blended in. You've got flush taillights. Here's what's interesting. They gave the car... Oh, wonderful. I've got ants. Look at this. Look at this. All right, I'm going to pause for a minute and fix this shit, and I'll be right back. nothing worse in the world, or at least in Florida, than horrible fire ants. I mean, these things will skeletonize a cow in like 10 minutes. And I'm no different. They can't wait to sink their pincers into me. So I don't know if I got them all. We'll see. If I start screaming during the video, you'll know what happened. Anyway, here's the most interesting feature on this car, or should I say lack of a feature, which is that they gave it a humpectomy. I mean, there isn't a hint of a slant or a curve or a spare tire hump at the back of this Continental, which was absolutely not expected. I mean, that was just a mainstay of Continental styling at the time. So that was pretty daring from Ford, because it ran the risk of turning off their long-term Continental buyers, but apparently it didn't. They retained enough of the Luxo barge mentality to keep the guys on board, and, you know, good for them. It all sort of worked out at the end. The inside was going to be less daring. You know, they did do some stuff, but they still had to appeal to the traditional Continental buyer and could only get away with so much. So even with a modern digital display, a good layout of lighted switchgear, and even Mercedes-style representational seat switches, there was also plenty of wood paneling, soft gushy leather, or optional velour. That's kind of interesting. Chrome touches and posh carpeting. And of course, you could also get a JBL stereo, power sunroof, and a heated front windshield. There were two models. There was the base model and the Signature. This is a Signature. The base ran about 24 grand. The Signature about 2 or 3 grand more than that, and had some pretty good equipment on it. And again, it exceeded sales hopes for the first year. They did pretty well. They wanted to make 35,000 of them, and I think they ended up with 39. And it only went up from there. There was only one year which went under that. I want to say it was 92 or 3. And then in the final year, you know, it went up again. So the car sold extremely well for Lincoln, and was a fairly important piece. And as such, you know, with all the technology, which we'll get into when I open the hood and whatever else, this is a pretty important car, and it's now mostly forgotten. In no way remembered for being groundbreaking. And it was even the first car to be fitted with dual airbags, or the first American car, almost the first car, because only the 944 Turbo from Porsche beat it to having driver and passenger airbags. That was it. In '88, Mercedes didn't have that. You know, Lincoln was really setting new trends with that. Very, very impressive. And now you see them with faded paint and peeling window tint in the parking lot of dog tracks and dollar stores. I mean, you look at an old Lincoln Continental now and you just don't see what it was. And I think it's a shame. You know, I think sometimes American car companies are penalized for being prolific, for having, you know, good production, for having success. And, you know, you look back, you love, like that 126 I did the other day. I mean, it's beloved, not just by me, but by the world. The Lincoln Continental, which in some ways broke more ground than the 126 when it came out, it's just forgotten. It's just, you know, something you see with, you know, that you don't think of. And I think that's a shame. I really think they should get more credit for that. But look, real quick, what was going on when I wasn't going to do this, because I know this is going to be a long video with all this stuff to get out. But in 1988, when this thing was new and roaming the streets, what was going on? Well, we'll give that a quick look. Probably the biggest news of the year was, well, there was a couple. The Pan Am Lockerbie bombing, if you remember that. It was the end of Pan Am. And frankly, it was the end of my dad, at least in terms of it. A few years before that, he had come to the conclusion that he had some extra money. You know, he was doing well. He was a travel agent. He was doing well in his business, and he had some extra money to invest. So he could have bought Naples real estate or stock in Pan Am. Well, being the guy that he was, he chose stock in Pan Am. You know, as a result, that's why I'm sitting here in summer sweltering and Peter's off in Norway riding motorcycles. Had my dad chosen to invest in Naples real estate, it would be a very different world for me right now, but he didn't. I never could find the stock certificates that became, of course, worthless. I would love to wallpaper my bathroom with them. I think that would be a neat look. But anyway, there it is. So that thing exploded. There was a bomb. It killed 270 people, like 259 on the plane, 11 on the ground. Another plane crash. The U.S. Navy shot down an Iranian passenger liner, ostensibly by mistake. That killed 290 people and became a big international incident. There was the rise of crack cocaine in the United States. You remember little Punky Brewster marching in the street saying, "Just say no to drugs," and, you know, all the criminal stuff. I mean, I don't, you know, yeah. If Americans do anything, they overreact, and, you know, then they overreact to their overreactions. And, you know, one day it's, oh my God, we've got to put pants on horses. And then the next day it's like, why did we put pants on horses? That was racist. We shouldn't do that. So anyway, who the hell knows? The space shuttle program resumed a couple of years after the Challenger incident. The end of the Iran-Iraq war, that was a pretty big deal. At the Emmanuel Noriega, if you remember him, old pineapple face, Panama, he ended up facing drug charges and kind of a Miami Vice type thing. Michael Dukakis, you know, driving around in that tank, he got the nod to be the, you know, it was the end of Reagan, who, look, man, politics aside, I have to say, I think Reagan was the last president that I absolutely admired and that I could enjoy his sense of humor. I mean, I took that for granted at the time. I don't think we've had a president with the same wonderful sense of humor since. That guy was quick and interesting, and I just loved listening to him. Yeah, I miss him. Anyway, Dukakis got the nod, and he ran against Bush 1. And, of course, that didn't work out well for either of them after a while. Movies, you had Die Hard. I remember that well because I was working at the school newspaper at the time, and one of the kids there reviewed the movie, and he said it was great. Rain Man came out, The Naked Gun, absolute classic. Big with Tom Hanks, man, bored me. Twins, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Music, you had Guns N' Roses, you had Enya. You had Robert Palmer, one of the most terrific video setups of all time. U2, you know, which sort of defined the 80s, really, at least music-wise. And Kylie Minogue, who, if I remember right, was pretty hot. So there it is. That was the scene as this car was roaming the streets new and, you know, doing its thing. So I'm going to break there for a minute. I'm going to get my glasses defogged, get my shit together, have another swig of coronavirus whiskey, and then we'll take a quick walk around the car, look inside the trunk, look inside the engine, and then hop in and go for a drive. So bear with me one moment. All right, so let's have a look around this thing. Now, this is an 88. I got this at a collector car auction recently. 13,000 miles. Absolutely stunning original condition. An absolute time machine. I mean, I've just, you know, I was completely smitten with it from the moment I saw it, and I had to have it, and it didn't matter what it cost, and here it is now. And I'm very, look, I mean, anyone who doubts the miles, let me tell you this, the tires, and we put this thing up in the air, probably should have replaced them, but I'm not gonna take them off. They're Firestones dated 10 of 87. So the car still has its original tires on it, which is why, by the way, you're not going to see a highway run on this car because it terrifies me. Even though they're not dry rotted and they seem great and they've been driving fine, I'm not going to run this thing at 100 miles an hour and see if one comes apart. From the sake of collectability, this car having original tires is absolutely epic. And it's, you know, all original paint, original interior, everything as it came. And it's just got to be one of the few that are left in this condition. And frankly, you know, even though it's not globally appreciated, the importance of this car and what it represents does merit, you know, somebody putting it in their Ford or Lincoln collection, I'd have to think. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if the world agrees with me. Anyway, you can see the the composite front bumpers, the impact strip on them, you know, very Mercedes style. Also Mercedes style headlamps with, you know, replaceable H4 bulbs instead of the old standard traditional sealed beams that might have gone in it. They did retain a waterfall grille and, of course, a very sort of prominent stand-up hood ornament, which harkens to, of course, Lincolns of the past and Mercedes at the time. So you can tell who they were going for. They were really trying to make this car competitive with some of the Europeans. That's also evident with the alloy rims that came with the Signature series instead of big clip-on white walls with, you know, screw-on wire wheel covers. It definitely has a more European look. You know, you look at the mirrors, same thing. They're sporty, they're color-coded. The door handles flush up against the car. The impact strip, the glass. The car has a very European look. And of course, that was the Ford Aero look at the time. But they did manage to make that sable Taurus look a little bit more formal with the back window and, of course, the straight formal trunk that you're not really expecting. All in all, I think the car absolutely looks terrific and became, you know, again, a good product of the time, and kudos to Ford for being so forward-thinking. So anyway, let's have a look inside the trunk. Here you see the keys. This is the bunch we got with it, which is nice, including one that's got the coating stamped on it. The thing is just such a survivor. I do like that it has the flip-up, you know, door lock, trunk lock thing that is, of course, classic American, and a nice chrome strip over the taillights, Continental. They run these things up so you have pretty good trunk access without having to lift over lights, and you get a pretty huge trunk. I mean, they did stretch this car out a bunch. They know their buyers. They know they had to, and they did. And even finished it appropriately. You know, it's got nice padding all the way around. It's nicely finished, but it's not over the top. Very Mercedes-esque, this trunk. And you'd be able to fit all kinds of toddlers, and even, you know, like with that 300 SE we did the other day of the same year, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they're going to fit in there no problem. If you lift up this carpet here, oh God, everything's hard. Here you can see where we'd find the spare tire. Again, a la Mercedes, they moved the fuel tank so they could do this, and you can see it's all original, never been off the car and the way it should be, so all very interesting to see. Here's an emergency fuel door release, and over on this side you have the ability to turn off the air suspension and some other thing which I forget. If you're lifting the car on a lift, you need to turn that off so it doesn't go crazy, the system. But either way, a very nice big trunk which would appeal to the traditional Continental buyer and not be a problem for them at all. Interesting that it doesn't have a trunk suck down though, which again, I don't know if that's cheapness or trying to look like a Mercedes. Being a Signature, this got the door entry code that of course became famous with all Fords, and that code is still in the owner's manual and works fine. And you know, I don't know, Ford guys like that shit. I think it's kind of weird, but they still kept it for a very long time. Have a look under the hood. And this is where it gets interesting. So again, here's where you're going to be able to see what Ford was up to with this. So here's a 3.8 liter. It's a transverse mounted V6. This was the only Continental at the time ever to be front wheel drive. That hadn't happened before. And, you know, I hear myself saying it like it's a good thing, but I hate front drive cars. But, you know, they had to do what they had to do. They took this rather pedestrian 3.8 from the Sable, Taurus, Thunderbird, Cougar. They added a balance shaft to make it smoother. They added multi-port fuel injection to make it premium. Tuned intake runners. About 140 horsepower, which of course went up over the years, but, you know, wasn't bad at the time. That went into a 4-speed automatic transaxle at the front, which, you know, had overdrive and was a good runner. And, you know, was an engine that you could argue was befitting of a luxury Lincoln at the time. Maybe not, maybe It's up to you. I think adding the balance shaft, that was enough. That makes it a premium car in my mind. And it is a very, very smooth V6. More interesting is the suspension. So, first of all, being the Taurus Sable platform, it had four-wheel independent, so it's got multi-link front and rear. It's got four-wheel disc brakes with ABS, which of course you'd want on a luxury car at the time, although it was, again, a little bit forward-thinking. But the suspension was what was most interesting, and this was Ford's attempt to make this car a handling luxo barge, something that hadn't been done before. It used airbags at the front and rear with a very high pressure pump, computer control that would pump air into them, and basically it had two settings, soft and hard, and they would activate based on the sensors on the car. It was tied to everything, including the braking system. You know, if the braking pressure got over a certain amount, the car determined you were in sort of a heavy braking situation, at which stage it would set the suspension to hard so it wouldn't nosedive. You know, when it detected that there was severe handling going on, left, right, whatever, it would also pump within milliseconds air into the shocks to make the suspension hard to cut down on body roll. And that's not unlike the ABC system for Mercedes, which came out many years later and was considered quite advanced at the time. That system was hydraulic. This one is all air. But it does set the stage for a very modern suspension system that reacts to the road and really aids the driver in having a nice, smooth. You know, look, the thing was, the car had to give the Luxo Barge ride. For the traditional Lincoln buyer, it had to ride like it was on air, which it was, and, you know, a boulevard ride, as they call it. But Ford also wanted it to be a driver's car under certain circumstances when pushed to the limits, and they pulled that off. Not just with the suspension, but also with the steering, which was a variable assist setup, which would actually double the effort. So when you're in a parking lot going 3 miles an hour, you know, you steer it with your pinky, a la old Lincoln, Cadillac, whatever. The minute you're at speed on the highway, the effort actually doubled and became much more responsive to the driver, and the car magazines at the time responded to that. They thought it was fantastic. In fact, Car and Driver put this car on their 10 best list for 1989, which was a very big accolade, and you know, shows you that the car really had some credentials at the time and was new, was forward thinking. So you know, all in all, you really have to be impressed. Four-wheel independent, tuned V6, you know, very fancy suspension, very fancy ABS braking with dive control and roll control and everything else. I mean, it was just absolutely a very advanced car for the time, more so than you think when you see these things, again, parked at the dog track or dollar store today. So neat stuff. I'm going to pause it again, get the hood down, get my shit in the trunk, then we're going to hop inside the car and go for a spin. So hold on one moment. Alright, so let's have a look inside this thing and see what we got. If you look through the back window, you can see the big speakers in the back have the JBL logo on them. Ford was pretty proud of that at the time and wanted to advertise it, so you really can't miss that. You also do have something of an opera window on this thing, although you could argue it is just part of the side window greenhouse, which of course the car did have tremendously good visibility. I do like the way that the doors rolled up into the roof. That helped with sealing and aerodynamics. The flush door handles, you could just tell that this was a different kind of car for Ford. Now here in the back seat, the Canadians are going to be pretty damn chipper. This was the first Continental to have 6-seat you know, position in a while. They had gone to 5-seat, 3 in the back, 2 in the front. All of a sudden you had 6 again, which was nice, and I think the livery guys probably appreciated that. It came standard with leather, with velour as a no-cost option, so it depended on what you preferred, and whoever ordered this one went with the velour. And even though they tried to go more modern and Euro, they of course did have to hearken to the earlier Continental panels to make the traditional Continental buyer happy. You can see it at a tremendous amount of footroom, legroom, which is great. You have these little pockets in the front, nice place for a handgun of some type, maybe a Colt 1911 or any handgun you want basically is going to fit in there. You also have a couple of low mounted oh shit handles for the rear passengers. You've got a little section here which probably would have had a first aid kit. I don't actually know, so maybe it is just a compartment where you could put more drugs or guns or whatever it is that you want to take with you. But I think a first aid kit would go nicely in there, and of course that would match Mercedes. You do have, of course, a center console armrest for your Canadian, so if you have two of them, they're going to be pretty chipper. And even if you have three, it's not bad. But you do have this button tufted velour, which is, not very Mercedes-esque, but is very vintage Lincoln-esque. And I think they had to do that in order to make the traditional buyer happy. Ditto the wood paneling, which, has the look of, something you'd use to line your cupboards with. I mean, it is not the fanciest looking wood out there, but it works. You get a nice big ashtray down here because people did smoke in the 80s still. You get some carpet on the door panels. You get some very lush carpet at the bottom, as well as some nice looking floor mats, and everything very nice, proper. And I don't know, probably because this is such a low mileage car, everything looks nice, tightened together. I wonder if it held up as well in the cars that got used and abused. Probably not. Up front, same story. An enormous amount of wood paneling, again, I think to appeal to the traditional Lincoln buyer, although they did manage to get enough stuff in there to to try and aim for the people who might have preferred a BMW or Mercedes. You even down to the representable seat switches, which are interesting. They're like little voodoo dolls for seats. You move it forward, it moves forward. This was a new thing at the time. Kind of, I would almost consider it the second generation of seat switch. You did have driver memory. Because it's the Signature series, you also got passenger 8-way power seat, which is nice. You've got all your power windows, your power mirrors, your door locks. You get a nice little map pocket there with a snap, so you can put some crap in there. Also a nice spot to put some sort of small 9mm, and everything's going to work out fine. So let's hop in and see what we got. You can see also the 6-passenger seating up front. If you want to fit 6 people in this thing, you can, which is nice. You've got split front seats with 2 different armrests for comfort. Lovely. Let's fire it up. Do that. You put this key in the ignition switch, very traditional, and that 6-cylinder fires to life. Okay, here you see a nice, modern, very, I read a Car and Driver article on this car that they weren't even offended by the instrumentation, which is good, because often they were. It's a nice, inoffensive digital readout. You got your speedometer in the middle. There you see just 13,000 miles on the clock. Your PRNDL with overdrive on this one. Message display. You can have a trip computer here. You can select different average economy, distance to empty, average speed, that sort of thing. Over here, the digital, you can come up with 3 different gauges. Gauge select, you got your voltmeter, your oil pressure, and your water temp, and of course your fuel with the number of gallons and a more traditional barcode type thing, letting you know how much fuel you have left. Over here you've got your light controls. This dims the panel display. This auto dims the brights when, distance wise, and of course the auto lamps, and that's all ensconced in wood. You've got your washer controls, you've got your tilt wheel, you've got your cruise control on the steering wheel with some more fake wood. Over here you've got your Continental logo with more fake wood. You've got a climate control here, which let's turn that on because it's really honestly hot as balls right now. So I'll just turn it on low and we'll see what we got. Nice cold air conditioning in this. Here's your message control. Here's your rear window defog. Here's your power antenna, which I believe still works. Yeah, you can see it coming up there in the back, so that's kind of nice. Here's your automatic climate control, which was nice and modern. Your clock, which was nice and modern. Ford JBL sound system. Like all original Ford radios, this one was broken when it came in. I'm not surprised at all. And rather than try and find another that's going to break, what I did was set it up with a sort of a hidden Bluetooth system. So if you open your phone, open Bluetooth, it's going to pop up, and you can connect and you can control the stereo with your phone. So the original stuff still comes with the car, but good luck having it fixed. You could get an optional CD player, which probably would have gone here, but this one didn't have it, so you just have a nice little compartment for your narcotics. In the 80s, you could put your cocaine in there, you know, gun, whatever it is you think you needed. Up here you had a very traditional sun visor. Nice stuff. If you want to powder your nose, you can do that with the mirror there. And, you know, and it's all very adjustable. So you can move this over to the door side of things. You can then run this down. Now you've got all kinds of protection from glare. Even over the mirror, you've got this little guy that flips down Mercedes style. Lincoln put a lot of thought, if not too much thought, into their sun visors. It gets even crazier over on the passenger side, where you've got the same thing. Again, you can hide the door, you can put that down, and rather than having the mirror on the visor itself, you have this little thing you pull, and down it comes, and you can change your cocaine mirror around. So very interesting. How do you get that up? Very interesting stuff from Lincoln at the time. In the glove box, this is kind of cool. So you've got your original JBL audio system cassette care. Obviously never been used on this 13,000 mile car, and nice to see it's still there. Even the fluid is still there. So if you want to clean your cassette heads, you've got the ability. That's all nice stuff for collectability. And then you get into your books, which is nice. So here's your code for the doors. Here's the original bill of sale for the car, which you know, it's fantastic when stuff like this comes with it. Here you can see the guy bought it new in 1988 and paid 25 grand for it, probably stickered in the 26 range. He paid 25. He was going to trade in something. Almost looks like a Camaro, but it's hard to read. But then somehow maybe they didn't give him enough, so it became no trade. But nice that the original bill of sale still exists with this car. It's interesting. This is Mark 7, Continental Town Car. Okay, so there's the maintenance schedule and the Lincoln Continental owner's manual. All very nice to see inside of there. Lovely. And there you see again, just 13,000 miles on the clock of this thing, which is absolutely epic. Epic. And as proven with the tires dated from 1987. So, all right, let me get my armrest down. We've got a column shift there. You've got tilt, which I've got at the right thing, but you can tilt it up and down from where it's at. Very, very nice. And let's go for a spin. And you can see it has a pretty nice vista over the hood with the Continental hood ornament. All very lovely stuff. You've got these aero mirrors, which are apparently heated, so not sure if it has the heated windshield or not. I don't see a button for it, but it could be automatic. Either way, who cares? One of the few options on this car. Yeah, anyway, man, look, I just love 80s Lincolns. I really do. I mean, if I found an 80s Mark 7, one of my favorite cars, Mustang based, I probably would have a hard time parting with it. I had one that I loved, and I ended up selling it, and I still regret it to this day. That was one of the questions asked me in the Ask Me Anything thing, which I'm going through, and there'll be a video with Reader's Rides and Ask Me Anything. One of them was, which cars do you regret selling? Well, one of those was a 1992 Lincoln Mark 7 LSC. God, I wish I had that car back. Anyway, you can see the V6 provides very adequate power. It's very smooth. You don't feel any vibration from it. And the acceleration is nice and level. And of course, that was what Ford was aiming for. Dalton did an absolute shit job on the windshield, which would be to be expected. You know, it's just the way he operates. And here's this guy with his dog. I have this strong feeling that he was the guy who was walking with the woman in the funny hat and the dog, and I wonder what happened to her. I hope he didn't kill her or anything. Maybe she had it coming. Anyway, what a nice driving car. You know, if you're not hard on the throttle, you barely notice that it's a front driver. It could just as well be rear. It's absolutely enormous. It's an absolute luxo barge, which is what they want it to be. But at the same time, yeah, they did a great job. The brakes, very, very responsive. The steering is responsive. And the car does feel more European than any prior Lincoln Continental, that's for damn sure. And it's just amazing to me that such an important car, one that was actually lauded by, you know, the car enthusiast magazines at the time, one that had all this modern technology that wasn't expected, that, you know, was Ford's attempt to make a modern car, to make a European level car, is just forgotten. It's just forgotten, and I just think that's completely unfair. Very little torque steer. They did a nice job of that. You know, good feel from the pedal. You know, nice power coming out of that. Nice forward momentum. It's just a nice driving car. And of course it had to be. You know, Ford had to make it recognizable to the luxo barge buyer. You know, they wanted the traditional Continental buyer to feel normal in the car, but at the same time they wanted it to take on Mercedes, and they did a pretty good job of it, so God bless them. Anyway, look, I'm not gonna have this video ramble on and on and on. If you have an interest in this thing, it is going to be for sale at Autohaus of Naples, on the web at autohausnaples.com, or by phone at 239-263-8500. And what a great collectible. 13,000 mile original 88 Lincoln Continental. You know, books, keys, original bill of sale, original tires on the car. Look, I don't mind if you... I'll buy you tires for it. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're going to put this thing in your collection in a air-conditioned garage somewhere, then I think it makes sense to have the original tires on it. I really do. If I replace them for you, I'll put them in the trunk so you keep them with you, because it proves the miles on this car, which are absolutely astounding. These things got used up, man. You know, they got used up. So it's really, really unusual to find one that that slipped through the cracks and has just 13,000 miles over, what, almost 40 years of ownership. So very cool stuff. Thank you very much for having a look today. Really appreciate it. Appreciate the comments. Appreciate the subscriptions. It means a lot to me. It really does. And I promise the flasks are going to be on the way soon to the winners. I'm not sure if I'm going to alert them or not. They'll probably just show up in the mail, but either way, that's coming, and we got some more fun stuff on the way. So thank you very much for having a look today. Really, really appreciate it, and we will see you with the next one. Take care.